Hello, creepers. Before we dive in, hit like, subscribe, and drop in the comments the worst place you can imagine during a zombie outbreak. Now let's get to it. The first thing I remember is the stink of salt and sweat rolling off the sea as our ships scraped against the rocky Spartan shore. The morning fog clung low, a pale veil drifting above thousands of us. Archers, spearmen, immortals. An army so massive the earth itself groaned under our boots. I stood among them, a soldier of Xerxes, another piece of iron in a war machine meant to crush Greece beneath its heel. But even then, something felt wrong in the air. We marched inland, toward the narrow jaws of the hot gates. The coastline curved behind us like a trap we were too proud to see. Officers barked orders. Engineers began mapping out trenches, fire pits, and rows upon rows of tents. Horses snorted, restless. The sea wind tasted metallic, like blood long dried on a blade. By noon, the camp rose into a sprawling city of canvas and iron spikes. Smoke from cooking pits twisted into the sky, carrying the scent of charred lamb. My brothers laughed, sharpened spears, boasted about how they'd carved their names into Greek shields by sunrise. Some even spoke of Leonidas, the so-called Lion of Sparta, as if he were prey waiting at the pass. I tried to laugh with them, but the tension sat heavy in my chest. I'd seen battlefields before. This didn't feel like one waiting to happen. This felt like one we had arrived too late to escape. Night bled across the sky without a single star in sight. Campfires flickered, their light warping the shadows. The sea turned into a black wall behind us. I sat with my squad around a brazier, passing a water skin and warm bread. The fire cracked. The metal of my armor groaned against the cold. Someone started humming an old tune about victory and returning home with honor. Honor. I held that word tightly, trying to believe it. Sleep never found me. The silence grew too sharp, like teeth waiting in the dark. Even the horses refused to settle, pulling at their reins, eyes rolling white in the firelight. When dawn finally pried open the horizon, it didn't bring comfort. It brought screams. Not battle cries, not the roar of an ambush. A single scream, wet, broken, raw, cut through the camp like a burning spear through flesh. I shot to my feet, grabbing my spear before my mind caught up. Soldiers spilled from their tents, half-dressed, blades drawn. Officers shouted questions no one answered. Then came the second scream. Closer, sharper. It sliced straight up my spine. I pushed through a cluster of men toward the commotion. The early light crawled over us, and I saw a shape on the ground. One of our scouts, thrashing, clutching at his own throat. Blood bubbled between his fingers. Another soldier knelt beside him, trying to pin him down, shouting for a healer. The wounded man convulsed once, twice. Then he went still. The soldier beside him exhaled in relief, before the scout's eyes snapped open, milky and empty, and he lunged, biting into the man's cheek with a crunch that echoed like cracking bone. Everything froze. Then, all at once, everything broke. The soldier's scream gurgled into a wet choke as his blood sprayed across the sand. Men stumbled backward, shouting. Some tried to pull the attacker off, his nails ripping at their faces as his jaws tore deeper into flesh. The bitten soldier spasmed violently, and within seconds, his spine arched, his eyes rolled white, and he sprang upright with a snarl, flinging two men aside with feral strength. Panic surged through the ranks. More cries erupted from deeper inside the camp. A tent collapsed with bodies thrashing inside. Horses snapped their ropes and bolted between rows of men. A commander tried to rally formation. Something bit into his shoulder, and dragged him screaming into the dirt. I staggered back as 3 of my brothers turned on each other, teeth finding flesh before blades could. All around me, the Persian war machine shattered. The transformation was too fast, too violent. We had no formation, no time, no plan. One bite, and a soldier became something else, something twisted, mad, impossibly fast. They charged blindly at any movement, any sound, throwing themselves against shields with no fear, no hesitation, no pain. A wall of burning tents lit the chaos, casting everything in a hellish red glow. The infected barreled through the fire, shrieking as their flesh blistered, but never slowing. Steel flashed, blood sprayed, and still, they came. I ran, because survival was the only thought left. I shoved past collapsing tents, ducked under flailing bodies, leapt over corpses still twitching in the sand. A dying soldier grabbed my ankle. Half his face was missing, yet he still snarled, jaws snapping from my leg. I tore free. The camp I helped build only hours before had become a slaughter pit. Flames rolled across broken tents, bodies piled against overturned carts. The shrieks of the infected drowned every commander's voice. I sprinted toward the camp's edge, where a handful of terrified survivors were already fleeing. Behind us, the Persian Empire was dying, and something far worse was rising in its place. I sprinted toward the only opening between rows of tents, spear clenched so tight my knuckles felt carved from bone. Behind me, a dozen surviving Persians ran in a broken line, some armored, most half-dressed, all terrified. A man to my left was yanked off his feet by an infected that hit him from behind like a boulder. They rolled across the ground, the creature biting into his throat with such force his blood sprayed in a sharp arc. His scream cut short as his windpipe tore, gurgling into silence. Another infected pounced on him before the first finished. We didn't stop. We couldn't. More of them burst from the maze of tents, some of our own brothers, armor still smoking from flames they'd sprinted through. Their eyes were dead. Their jaws hung loose, teeth bloody. They moved like animals that had been waiting their whole lives to be freed. One charged straight at me, sprinting low and fast. I barely got my spear up before it crashed into me. The impact rattled my whole arm, but the iron tip punched into its collarbone. It didn't even flinch. It clawed up the shaft, snarling inches from my face. I braced and drove my knee into its ribs with everything I had. Still nothing. No pain, no hesitation. Just pure, killing instinct. I shoved the creature back and slammed its skull against a tent pole. The wood snapped. The skull didn't. It lunged again. I jammed my dagger upward through its eye. Only when the blade buried deep did the body finally drop. The moment it fell, 3 more infected tore through the burning tent behind it. "Run!" I shouted, though my voice was already drowned by shrieks and collapsing wood. We pushed forward, weaving through the burning lanes. Bodies burned where they fell. Some writhed on the ground, transforming as fire consumed them. It didn't matter. Nothing slowed them except death. A commander tried to form a shield line near the horse corrals. "Hold! Hold!" he roared. An infected immortal crashed into him like a battering ram, biting deep into his helmet strap and ripping half his face free. The line collapsed instantly. Men scattered, trampled by the very horses they were trying to mount. The commander's scream was still ringing in my ears when a familiar voice called out behind me. "Brother!" I turned and saw Daria, tall, broad, always laughing, now staggering toward me with a gash down his chest. Behind him, 5 infected sprinted like wolves. I grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. We ran together, but he stumbled again. I saw it then. His wound wasn't just a cut. Teeth marks. Deep. Already darkening. "Leave me," he said between ragged breaths. "You know what will..." "No." But the tremor in his hand said everything. He shoved me hard, forcing me to break stride. "Go!" Then he turned, roaring a battle cry as he charged the infected barehanded. They buried him beneath them in seconds. His scream tore through me. I couldn't save him. I ran harder. A massive tent ahead collapsed, its center pole snapping and dropping flaming canvas over a cluster of soldiers. Their silhouettes twisted beneath the fabric as the infected climbed over it like animals tearing into a carcass. I skirted wide, my chest burning from smoke. My eyes streamed. The heat clawed at my lungs. The camp's outer perimeter was close. I could see the wooden stakes marking its edge through the smoke. But a pack of infected rushed in from the right, their limbs jerking violently as they sprinted. One tackled a man just ahead of me, biting deep into the back of his neck. His legs kicked wildly before going limp. Two more went for me. I thrust my spear through the first one's mouth, the tip bursting through the back of its skull. The second slammed into my shoulder, knocking me off balance. Its teeth snapped at my cheek as I jammed my dagger upward, stabbing again and again until warm blood coated my fingers. It fell twitching at my feet. My breath shook as I stood over it, watching its fingers claw weakly through the dirt, even after its head was ruined. "Move!" someone shouted. "They're coming from behind!" I spun. A whole wave of infected crashed through the fiery haze behind us. Dozens of them, sprinting full force, bodies blackened, limbs burned, jaws hanging open like dogs rabid with hunger. We bolted. Arrows of fire collapsed from above as the last rows of tents caved in, sending burning debris raining over everything. The ground shook under the stampede of both the living and the dead. We hit the perimeter just as the wave was about to swallow us. A few surviving Persians were already climbing over the stakes or shoving each other through the narrow gaps. I shoulder-checked one aside, wedging myself through the fence, over the stakes, into the open, onto the rocky ground leading toward the hot gates. Behind us, the Persian camp fell into itself. Fire, screams, snapping flesh, collapsing structures. Everything we were, everything we'd built, everything we believed in, devoured in a single morning. Only a dozen of us remained, and the horde that destroyed the Empire's greatest army was coming right behind us. The ground turned from sand to jagged rock beneath our feet as we fled the burning camp, lungs clawing for air, legs shaking with every stride. Behind us, the shrieks of the infected tore across the coastline like a storm, racing to devour us whole. What remained of the Persian Empire ran in a broken line. 12 of us, maybe less, bleeding, burned, half mad with terror. Ahead, the hot gates, a narrow throat of stone, smoke drifting from torches wedged along the canyon walls. Shields glinted in the early light. Red cloaks swayed like blood caught in the breeze. Spartans. 300 of them stood in perfect formation, and they thought we were charging. We tried to wave, shout, signal, anything, but our voices drowned in the roar of the horde behind us. The Spartans lowered their spears. "No!" I tried to scream, but the word ripped out as a gasp. We hit them like animals thrown into a butcher's pen. The first rank of Persian survivors were impaled instantly, skewered through ribs, stomachs, chests. Bodies jerked and thrashed as Spartan spears punched clean through them. Blood sprayed in red arcs against bronze shields. 2 of my brothers collapsed beside me. their bodies sliding down spear shafts before they were kicked off and discarded on the rocks. The Spartans roared, stepping forward, pushing the line. I stumbled backward, arms raised, desperate to show I wasn't attacking. Behind me, the infected shrieked. Between the Spartans' killing line and the horde stampede, there was nowhere left to run. One Spartan captain barked something in Greek, an order, sharp and cold. His spear leveled at my throat. But then the horde broke from the smoke. The Spartans froze. Even they weren't expecting that. The infected surged over the ridgeline like a flood. Dozens, then hundreds, skin blistered, eyes milky, jaws snapping. They sprinted on burned limbs, some still smoldering, some dragging chunks of tent canvas behind them. The moment they saw movement, they shrieked and charged. I spun, bracing my spear. The first infected slammed into it so hard the impact rattled my spine. I screamed and twisted the shaft, ripping the point upward through its jaw. It collapsed, but two more took its place immediately, clawing, grabbing, teeth flashing. I kicked one off, ramming the other with the butt of my spear, cracking bone. No pain showed in its face. It lunged again, and I barely sidestepped as its teeth snapped where my neck had been. The Spartans watched, confused, calculating. A Persian fighting something they didn't understand. Another infected tackled me from the side, dragging me across the rocks. My spear flew from my grip. I felt teeth scrape my bracer as the creature pinned me, snarling, spit hitting my face. I grabbed a fist-sized rock and smashed it into its temple again and again until its skull caved inward and the body went limp. I rolled away, just in time to see the next wave coming. 10 of them, maybe more. I backed toward the Spartan line, gasping, blood dripping from my forearm. "Help!" I shouted, though I knew they didn't understand. The infected crashed into me like a tide. One clawed across my back, tearing leather and flesh. Another clamped onto my arm. I drove my dagger into its temple and ripped it free. A third jumped onto my shoulders, its breath hot, rancid, teeth sinking into my helm's strap. I slammed myself into a rock wall, crushing the creature against it until bone cracked. Still more came. My legs buckled. The world blurred. Hands reached for me from all sides. I was going to die here, slaughtered by my own brothers, turned into monsters, in front of the very warriors I had come to conquer. Then, a thunderous roar shook the air, not from the infected, from the Spartans. Bronze boots stamped forward, shields locked, spears leveled. They hit the horde like a moving wall of death. Spear tips punched through skulls with brutal precision. Shields slammed into bodies, shattering jaws. Spartans drove forward in unison, pushing the infected back step by step, their discipline carving order into chaos. A spear ripped past my ear and impaled an infected lunging at me from behind. A Spartan soldier kicked the corpse off the shaft, reclaiming the weapon with a spin. Another shield slammed into an infected that had clawed its way toward my feet, crushing its ribs before a spear ended it. The Spartans moved like an iron tide, silent, relentless, coordinated brutality. Within moments, the first wave of infected was reduced to twitching bodies littering the rocks. Silence fell. The Spartans stood over the corpses, shields dripping with blackened blood. Their formation held steady, but their eyes, cold, calculating, shifted toward me and the handful of Persian survivors cowering behind rocks. Our chests heaved, their spears turned. Another mistake. Another misunderstanding, and we'd die right here. But for a single breath, no one moved. Not them. Not us. Not even the dead. A temporary, fragile ceasefire carved out of pure necessity. We stood between spear and death, and for the first time since the outbreak began, neither side struck. For a long moment, no one spoke. The Spartans' bronze shields dripped with the blackened blood of the infected, and every one of their spears now pointed directly at us. 8 Persian survivors huddled among the rocks, exhausted, shaking, barely able to stand. I raised my hand slowly, palms open. My heart hammered so violently I could feel it thumping against the bruises on my ribs. We had survived the horde, only to die at the feet of the men we were sent to conquer. A Spartan officer stepped forward, cloak whipping in the wind. His eyes were cold, unreadable. He barked something in Greek, an order, and 3 Spartans immediately closed in, spears lowering. They were going to kill us. One of my brothers bolted. A Spartan spear punched clean through his back before he took a second step. He folded silently to the ground. The rest of us froze. Another order barked. Shields shifted. Spears angled downward. They were going to finish it. Then a lone Spartan sprinted from the pass, panting so hard his words broke into gasps. He stumbled before the officer, pointing back the way he came. The officer's expression changed. Not relief, not anger, but something tighter, sharper. Urgency. I didn't understand their language, but I understood the way every Spartan suddenly tightened their grips on their spears. Something worse was coming. The officer snapped new orders. Immediately, the Spartans formed a new line. Shields locked, spears angled toward the canyon mouth. 20 soldiers stepped forward to extend the front. 10 more reinforced the flanks. And us? They pushed us to the back, between 2 boulders, like livestock waiting their turn for slaughter. The rocks trembled. A low, dragging sound echoed down the pass, like dozens of bare feet scraping stone. Shapes emerged in the dim morning light. Infected. Not sprinting. Not shrieking. Just wandering forward in a slow, eerie stagger. Dozens of them. Their heads lolled unnaturally. Their arms hung like broken branches. Some dragged spears still stuck through their torsos. Armor melted into their flesh from the earlier fires. The Spartans held perfectly still. Shields locked. Spears aimed. No sound. No movement. Not even breath. The infected didn't see them. Not yet. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to move. Sweat trickled into the cuts along my neck, burning like poison. One wrong twitch, and the horde would... A pebble shifted behind us. An involuntary flinch. A gasp. A small, sharp scrape of metal. An infected froze. Its head snapped toward us. Then it screamed. A piercing animal shriek that made my bones rattle. The entire horde ignited. They charged. The Spartans met them with a thunderous roar. Their front line absorbed the impact like stone absorbing a wave. Spears rammed through skulls. Shields slammed into torn flesh. The infected crashed against them in a frenzy, clawing and biting, throwing themselves onto spear points with no care for their own bodies. The formation held, at first. Then an immortal infected barreled in, heavier and faster than the others. It slammed into a Spartan shield, knocking the soldier back a full step. The line wavered. A gap opened. 3 infected poured through the breach. The Spartans behind reacted instantly, but not fast enough. One was dragged down. teeth ripping into his exposed thigh before another Spartan crushed the attacker's skull. The line reformed, but blood already stained the rocks. More infected pressed in. Too many. Too fast. One Spartan, barely more than a boy, slipped on the blood-slick stone. He hit the ground hard. His shield skidded away from him. 3 infected lunged. He tried to crawl backward, screaming for help, but the formation was locked and couldn't break to save him. He was going to die. Before I realized what I was doing, I sprinted forward. I slammed the butt of my spear into the first infected's jaw, knocking it back. The second tackled me, but I twisted, jamming my dagger through its eye. The third crashed into the boy. I grabbed it by the hair, yanking it back, its teeth scraping inches from his face before I drove my spear into its skull. The young Spartan stared at me, eyes wide with shock. He didn't understand the words, but my gesture was universal. Get up. He scrambled to his feet, retrieving his shield. The Spartans nearest us hesitated. Confusion, disbelief, but only for a breath. Then one nodded sharply. Permission. We joined the line. Persians and Spartans, shoulder to shoulder, bracing for the next wave. My arms shook with exhaustion, but adrenaline kept me upright. The infected slammed into us again, and again, and again. Each impact rattling through shield and bone. I stabbed through gaps, spearing skulls, ducked claws, kicked bodies away before they could latch onto my legs. A Spartan beside me roared as he split an infected skull with the rim of his shield. Another used his spear like a lever, heaving 2 bodies off the line at once. Together, the line held. Bit by bit, the horde thinned. Shrieks turned to gurgles. Gurgles turned to silence. Silence turned to still twitching bodies at our feet. When the final infected fell, collapsing in a heap of mangled limbs, the Spartans held their formation for 3 long breaths, then finally lowered their shields. The boy I had saved looked at me again, chest heaving, blood smeared across his cheek. He touched his fist to his chest. Not a salute, not exactly, but something close. Respect. Unwilling allies, forged in blood. For the moment, not enemies. For the first time since dawn, the world stopped trying to kill us. The battlefield outside the hot gates was a graveyard of twisted bodies. Persians, Spartans, and infected all strewn across the stone. The air stank of smoke, blood, and the sour heat of ruptured guts. My arms trembled so violently, I had to brace my spear against the ground just to stay upright. Around me, Spartans slumped onto their shields, heads bowed, chests heaving. Crimson cloaks hung in tatters. Armor was cracked and smeared with blackened gore. Some wiped blood from their eyes, with hands that shook as much as mine. No one spoke. No one celebrated. The only sound was the soft, methodical thunk. Thunk. Thunk of Spartans walking through the corpse field, finishing the twitching infected with clean, practiced precision. A spear tip through a skull, a blade driven into a temple, a boot pressed down while a sword cracked bone. Efficient, cold, necessary. I leaned against a boulder, breathing deep, trying not to collapse. My brothers, what few remained, rested in a loose circle around me. 12 of us had escaped the camp. Now, only 5 remained. We watched the Spartans, unsure if we were next on their list. Then the young Spartan I had saved earlier approached. His helmet was off now, revealing sweat-matted hair, a gash over his brow, and a face still barely old enough to grow a proper beard. He held out a water skin, not like an order, not like a threat, a gift, a simple thank you. I took the water skin slowly, half expecting a trick, but the water inside was cool, fresh, life-saving. I drank, wiped my mouth, and handed it to my closest surviving brother, who blinked in disbelief before taking a long swallow. The young Spartan nodded once, satisfied. It felt strange, alien, a Spartan offering kindness to a Persian. But the battlefield had changed something in all of us. A ripple of shifting armor drew my attention. Spartans parted ranks as a figure approached from the rear of the pass, a man with a dark beard, a crimson cloak heavier than the others, eyes like carved obsidian. Leonidas, king of Sparta. Even exhausted, the Spartans straightened when he neared. They spoke to him in low, tense voices, gesturing at us, at the corpses, at the canyon behind. Their words were sharp, clipped, urgent. Leonidas walked past them without answering. He studied us, not with hatred, not with fear, with the cold calculation of a man who had weighed the battlefield and understood its cruel truth in a single glance. His gaze moved over each Persian survivor, our torn armor, our burned faces, the black blood smeared across our skin. His eyes lingered on the young Spartan beside me, then on the corpses of infected Persians scattered among the rocks. He knew. Our army was gone. The horde had devoured it. We were not soldiers of Xerxes anymore. We were scraps of an empire swallowed whole in a single morning. A Spartan officer stepped forward, murmuring something to the king. Leonidas gave a firm nod. Then came the order. Spartans moved without hesitation, dropping shields onto the ground at our feet. Spears followed. Short swords, fresh water, leather straps, even spare pieces of armor. My brothers stared, stunned. The officer barked again, and a Spartan shoved a shield toward me. Round bronze, heavy, scarred. I gripped it with my forearm, and the weight surprised me. Balanced, solid, built not to intimidate, but to endure. The young Spartan handed me a spear next. I understood then. Leonidas wasn't saving us. He was preparing us. He had seen the way the horde moved. He had counted the corpses. He had measured the silence growing between the canyon walls. This was only the first waves, and he understood the truth before any of us. The Persian Empire wasn't at war with Greece anymore. Both nations were at war with death itself. Leonidas stepped back, lifted his chin, and looked at me with a grim acknowledgement, an unspoken pact carved in blood and necessity. We were allies now, not by choice, but because there was no one left to fight except what was coming next. Leonidas didn't waste a breath. The moment the last corpse stopped twitching, he issued a sharp command. A handful of Spartans broke from formation and assembled near the front of the pass, checking straps, tightening shields, testing spear points against the stone. Then the king turned and pointed directly at me. He wanted me with them. I swallowed hard and followed, grip tightening around the Spartan spear I'd been given. The young Spartan from earlier joined our group as well, giving me a brief nod before pulling his helmet on. He didn't speak. I doubted he knew how to say my name, but the acknowledgement was enough. We moved quickly down the rocky slope toward the coastline, where the Persian camp once stood. Smoke still drifted from the ruins like mourning veils. The wind carried the smell of burnt canvas, and something fouler beneath it. Rot, blood, sour breath, the scent of bodies left too long in the sun. Birds circled overhead. We got close enough to see everything, and the sight punched the breath from my lungs. The Persian camp, an ocean of tents that once held tens of thousands, was now a writhing sea of corpses on their feet. Every soldier who should have been drilling, resting, repairing armor. Every man we had marched with. All of them were now zombies, crowding shoulder to shoulder, moaning, snapping, clawing at whatever still lived. The entire plain churned with undead Persian bodies stretching from one end of the camp to the other like a living grave. Only one place still held out. At the far end of the camp, pressed against a line of overturned supply wagons and smashed barricades, a few hundred immortals still fought. Golden masks glinted between the bodies piling around them. Their formation was broken, desperate, but still intact. Barely. Their spears were shortened, shields cracked, armor torn open, yet they held on through sheer will. Every lunge they made was met with 3, 4, 5 zombies slamming into them, dragging at their arms, biting at their legs. They were dying on their feet, and everyone in our group knew it. The Spartans stared in stunned silence. Even they hadn't expected this. This wasn't a battle. It was a burial ground still in motion. We moved carefully through the rocks for a closer view. Too close. Someone behind me misstepped, boots scraping hard against stone. It echoed across the field louder than a war horn. A cluster of zombies nearest to us froze mid-lurch. Their heads snapped toward the sound. Every neck twisted with a sickening crack. Then their jaws opened. They shrieked, and the nearest pack, dozens, broke from the greater horde and charged straight toward us, scrambling over tents and bodies with terrifying speed, tearing the distance apart in seconds. "Fall back!" one Spartan roared. We sprinted, boots pounding over scorched earth. The infected were faster, much faster. They barreled after us with unnatural speed, leaping over bodies, crawling under broken carts, using anything they could to propel themselves closer. A Spartan tripped. 3 infected were on him before he even hit the ground, teeth sinking into his leg and shoulder. His scream cut short as they ripped into his throat. Another Spartan turned to help. "No!" I shouted, grabbing his arm and yanking him forward. "They're gone!" He didn't understand the words, but he understood the truth. We ran. The hot gates rose ahead of us, a narrow slit of safety between towering cliffs. I saw bronze shields glinting in the sunlight, Spartans bracing for our return. Behind me, the infected shrieked. So close, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. "Faster!" I shouted, even though my lungs burned raw. The scouts screamed warnings as we neared. The shield wall didn't open. Not yet. Not until the last possible moment. The infected closing behind us were close enough that I could hear their nails scraping the rocks. My legs felt like they were turning to water. One brushed my back. Its fingers raked across my shoulder guard. Then, "Now!" The Spartan line split in the center like a pair of bronze doors, swinging open. We hurled ourselves through the gap, tripping, rolling, colliding with shields and bodies. The moment the last Spartan dove through, the wall slammed shut. The first infected hit the closed shields with such force, the sound echoed across the cliffs. Several more slammed into it, teeth biting bronze, clawing at seams. The Spartans pushed as one. Spears punched through the cracks. Bodies dropped one after another. When the last corpse slid down the shield wall, leaving a smear of black blood on the bronze, the Spartans finally exhaled. A few even laughed, short, breathless bursts of relief. They thought the worst was over, but the scouts knew better. They ran straight to Leonidas, panting out frantic Greek. Their gestures alone were enough to paint the picture. Another horde was coming. Bigger. Closer. While the king processed this, another figure rode up the pass. A lone soldier, armor unfamiliar, dust-caked, bleeding from a dozen cuts. He dismounted so fast he nearly fell. His voice cracked as he spoke to Leonidas, drawing shapes in the dirt with trembling fingers. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the meaning. A secret mountain path, unknown to the Persians, guarded by an allied Greek army. Guarded. Until now. Leonidas stared at the ground, jaw tight, eyes burning. The guard unit had fallen, and another horde was coming from behind. We were about to be surrounded, trapped between two walls of death. The hot gates, the Spartans' greatest advantage, had just become our tomb. The moment the realization hit, surrounded, trapped, the air itself seemed to tighten around my throat. The harsh midday light burned through the canyon, harsh against the rising smoke. The ground vibrated under my boots, a low trembling that grew sharper, angrier, heavier. Then the sound hit. A distant roar. No, not a roar. A stampede of bodies. The main horde. Every Spartan stiffened. Leonidas lifted his spear, and the entire phalanx shifted like a single machine, locking into place. Shields slammed into position, spears angled, jaw lines tightened. The rocks beneath my feet shook harder. The first shapes appeared through the drifting smoke. At first, just silhouettes. Then clearer. Then horrifyingly close. The Immortals, or what was left of them. Golden masks cracked, armor torn open, limbs jerking with unnatural force. They sprinted in front of the lesser infected, faster than any human should move, their feet slamming into the earth with bone-splitting weight. The Spartans didn't flinch. Leonidas gave the signal. The world exploded. The Immortals crashed into the Spartan line like boulders thrown by gods. Shields buckled inward, bronze groaning, dust erupting around us. I felt the shock slam through the shield wall and into my ribs. Spears punched through skulls, but the Immortals didn't fall easily. They clawed, bit, rammed their bodies through the gaps, trying to tear the formation apart from the inside. One smashed into the shield in front of me, snarling through his cracked mask. His teeth scraped bronze. I rammed my spear upward, shoving the point into his eye socket. He convulsed, but kept pushing. A Spartan beside me drove his spear through the Immortal's jaw, pinning him to the ground. We had no time to breathe. The horde behind them hit next. Hundreds of infected Persian soldiers slamming into us with shrieks so sharp, they rattled the stone walls. It was like holding back a collapsing mountain with our bodies. But the Spartans held. The terrain funneled the horde into the narrowest point. Their discipline carved through chaos. Every step they pushed, another wave of bodies fell. Skulls split, blood splattering across shields and faces. For a moment, a brief, blinding moment, I believed we could survive. Then the second scream came, high, piercing, echoing from above. I spun. Shapes poured down the rocky goat path behind us, black silhouettes spilling across the cliffside like insects erupting from a nest. Dozens, maybe hundreds. The second horde. They hit the rear Spartan line before anyone could even shout a warning. The back ranks turned, forming a second shield wall just in time to absorb the impact, but they were too few. The infected crashed into them like a tidal wave. Shields flew from hands. Men were dragged into the swarm before they could even scream. Leonidas shouted orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. The phalanx split into two fronts, one facing the main horde, one facing the goat path horde. The formation warped, bent, stretched thin. Too thin. A Spartan to my left was yanked into the rear mass, his helmet torn off, his throat ripped open so violently his blood sprayed across my cheek. Another Spartan lost his footing. 3 infected tore into his leg and dragged him screaming into the dust. The rear wall collapsed. The infected surged in from behind. We were being crushed, front and back, bronze and flesh, human and dead. The formation shattered around me. Spears snapped. Shields fell. Spartans roared and clawed and stabbed even as they were ripped apart. I slammed my shield into an infected woman sprinting at me, caving her jaw in before driving my spear through her skull. Another leapt at me. I smashed the rim of my shield into its face until bone pulp sprayed across my forearm. It wasn't enough. A Spartan captain near me, limping from a torn calf, fell as an immortal infected slammed him to the ground. I sprinted toward him, stabbing wildly, trying to pry the creature off. Leonidas reached him first, ripping the infected's head back and cleaving it with a single brutal strike. The captain couldn't stand. Leonidas turned toward me, face smeared with blood, eyes burning with something far heavier than fear. He grabbed the injured captain, shoved him against my chest. He shouted in Greek, but I understood the meaning. "You carry him. You live." I shook my head, breath breaking. "I'm not leaving you." He roared in my face and pointed toward the road leading away from the past, toward Sparta. Then he bellowed to his soldiers, a final order, the last one he would ever give. Spartans formed a circle around us, shields pressing inward, spears stabbing outward in every direction. A living barrier of bronze and muscle in defiance. The infected slammed into them from all sides, piling bodies against shields, biting through arms, dragging men down. Still, they held. Leonidas shoved the captain onto my back. I hooked my arm under his leg and dragged him, stumbling over corpses as the circle tightened. "Go!" the king roared. The Spartans broke formation, not to retreat, but to carve a path. They charged outward, spears sweeping, blades tearing, smashing a corridor through the horde with their bodies alone. "Move!" One Spartan screamed at me, shoving me forward as a clawed hand tore a chunk of flesh from his throat. I ran, dragging the captain, chest burning, legs failing. Spartans fell on all sides, swallowed by the infected. One reached out, blood pouring from his mouth, grabbing my arm long enough to swing at an infected lunging for my neck. His blade missed. The zombie's teeth snapped toward my face. A spear whistled past my ear and impaled the creature clean through the skull. Leonidas. He stood alone behind the collapsing line, drenched in gore, surrounded by dozens of infected closing in on him. He looked at me, just a single heartbeat of connection between king and foreigner. Then he turned and charged back into the swarm with a roar that shook the canyon. I didn't see him fall. I only heard the sound, a wall of bodies collapsing over a single man, and the wet, tearing frenzy that followed. I stumbled onto the open road, dragging the captain as the screams behind us turned into a deafening, churning storm. The hot gates disappeared behind a wall of bodies devouring the last Spartans alive. I didn't look back. I couldn't, because the only thing ahead of us now was the long road to Sparta. The captain's arm hung over my shoulders, his weight dragging me sideways with each stumble. His breath rattled against my neck, wet, uneven, too slow. The sky above was a washed-out smear behind the drifting smoke, the light bleeding through in harsh, colorless streaks. Nothing felt real anymore. My boots scraped the stone, every movement sending pain up my spine, every breath burning like sand poured into my lungs. Behind us, the hot gates roared with distant shrieks, thousands of them, echoing down the stone like a storm trapped in a canyon. Every sound made my muscles tighten. Every shadow made my heart kick. But nothing followed. Not yet. The path twisted through the mountains, narrowing at points so tight I had to turn sideways, half carrying, half dragging the wounded Spartan through. Blood dripped from his leg wound, pattering onto the dust like a slow ticking clock. "Stay with me," I muttered, not caring that he couldn't understand. His head lolled. His fingers twitched against my chest. We pushed on. Stone gave way to dirt as the path widened. Trees swayed in the wind, branches creaking like old bones rubbing together. No birds, no voices, no signs of life at all. Only silence. And the wind. Time blurred into a smear of footsteps, breath, and dust. Hours, minutes, I couldn't tell anymore. My throat felt scraped raw, my chest burned with every inhale, and the captain grew heavier with every step. Then, finally, the world opened. A ridge, a valley below, and there, rising from the earth like a fortress carved by gods. Sparta. Dark red rooftops, stone towers, thick walls etched against the pale sky. For a moment, something like hope cracked through my exhaustion. I shifted the captain's weight, bracing him better. "We made it." He didn't answer. I took another step toward the city. Then I froze. Smoke curled from the rooftops. Thick, black, rising in ugly, twisting pillars. Screams drifted across the valley. Human screams. And another sound underneath. Higher, sharper, familiar. A shriek. My stomach dropped. Shapes moved near the outer gates, jerking, sprinting forms slamming against the wooden doors. More climbed the walls, clawing and thrashing like insects, eating through a carcass. The gates buckled. The city shuddered. Sparta was already burning. A figure stumbled through the open hills toward us, a man in torn armor, staggering on a broken leg. He looked back over his shoulder, then saw me. He tried to shout. A blood-soaked infected slammed into his back, tearing him off his feet. His scream was ripped from the air as the creature buried its teeth in his throat. Blood sprayed across the grass in a bright, pulsing arc. The captain in my arms stirred weakly. I held him tighter. Sparta's gates cracked inward with a thunderous boom. A swarm of infected poured out across the valley like a flood breaking free. Hundreds, maybe more, charging toward the countryside and toward us. I backed up instinctively, my legs shaking. My grip tightened on the captain's arm, even as my hands trembled. The road behind us led only to the hot gates, a dead end, a place already swallowed whole. The road ahead led to Sparta, now burning, overrun, consumed. There was no safe path, no more armies, no more walls. Only a wounded Spartan captain on my shoulders, and a world collapsing into hunger and screams. I exhaled slowly, tasting ash on my tongue. "This isn't the end," I whispered to him. Maybe I was lying. Maybe I wasn't. Either way, I stepped off the ridge and began moving toward the burning city, toward the next hell waiting to swallow us whole.